Hollywood once made movies so scandalous that church groups organized protests outside theaters. But what exactly did audiences see on those screens that terrified censors across America? Before 1934, a brief era of filmmaking ignored nearly every rule about crime, power, and desire. The result was a wave of films so provocative that cities threatened bans and nationwide boycotts. Tonight, we're uncovering 14 pre-code movies that pushed Hollywood too far, including one so shocking it nearly vanished from history. The Story of Temple Drake, 1933. Hollywood rarely admitted when it had crossed a line, but in 1933, even studio executives quietly realized the story of Temple Drake had stepped into territory American audiences were not supposed to see. The film was based on William Faulkner's controversial novel Sanctuary, already infamous for its grim portrait of crime and moral collapse in the American South. Paramount believed the notoriety surrounding the book would attract attention. It did, just not the kind they expected. The story follows Temple Drake, a reckless young woman whose late-night accident leaves her stranded among dangerous criminals. What begins as an impulsive adventure quickly spirals into a nightmare involving kidnapping, intimidation, and psychological control by a sadistic gangster named Trigger. For audiences in the early 1930s, the themes were deeply unsettling. The film hinted at brutal violence and the collapse of social respectability, subjects many believe movies should never approach. Religious organizations quickly condemned the picture, and several theaters refused to show it at all. Newspapers warned Hollywood had crossed into dangerous territory, while censorship boards demanded cuts or banned the film outright. What made the controversy worse was the film's tone. Temple Drake never softened its darkness. It forced audiences to confront it directly. The backlash was immediate, helping push Hollywood toward the strict enforcement of the production code soon after. Red-Headed Woman, 1932. In the early 1930s, Hollywood often portrayed ambitious women as cautionary figures. If a female character pursued power, money, or romance too aggressively, the story usually ended with punishment, restoring moral balance before the final scene faded to black. Red-Headed Woman refused to follow that formula. Released in 1932, the film introduced audiences to Lil Andrews, played with bold confidence by Jean Harlow. Lil begins the story as a secretary working for a wealthy executive. But she has little interest in climbing the professional ladder through patience or loyalty. Instead, she seduces her married boss. And that is only the beginning. As the story unfolds, Lil moves through high society by charming a series of powerful men. Affairs, manipulation, and scandal follow wherever she goes. Yet what truly shocked audiences was not the behavior itself. It was the film's attitude toward it. Rather than portraying Lil as tragic or immoral, the movie treats her with surprising humor and sympathy. She remains clever, confident, and unapologetic about her ambitions. Conservative groups reacted quickly. The Catholic press condemned the film for glorifying adultery, while religious leaders warned it encouraged women to abandon traditional roles. What made the story even more unsettling was its tone. Written by Anita Luce, the script gave Lil sharp, witty dialogue that framed her actions less as villainy and more as social strategy. Babyface, 1933. If any film perfectly captured the rebellious spirit of the pre-code era, it was Babyface. Released in 1933, the story begins in a grim industrial town where Lily Powers, played by Barbara Stanwyck, works in a bar owned by her abusive father. For years, she has been forced to endure exploitation from men who see her as little more than property. Then one day, someone gives her unexpected advice. A cobbler quotes the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, telling her that power belongs to those bold enough to take it. Lily listens. She boards a train to New York and begins climbing the corporate ladder in a way Hollywood had never portrayed so bluntly. Each promotion comes after another strategic affair with a powerful man inside the bank where she works. Floor by floor, office by office, bedroom by bedroom. The structure of the film makes the strategy unmistakable. Lily literally rises higher in the building as her influence grows. For audiences in 1933, the implication was explosive. Here was a woman openly using sexuality as a tool of economic power, and the film showed the process without apology. Religious groups were outraged. Censors demanded immediate revisions. the studio was forced to re-edit the ending to make Lily appear repentant. For decades, and only the heavily censored version was available. But historians later discovered the original print, revealing just how daring the film truly was. Babyface wasn't simply provocative. It directly challenged the social rules Hollywood was supposed to enforce, and that challenge helped push the film industry closer to strict censorship. Scarface, 1932. Violence had appeared in movies before, but in 1932, Scarface brought a level of brutality that many Americans believed Hollywood should never show. Inspired loosely by the rise of Al Capone, the film follows Tony Camonte, an ambitious gangster who claws his way to the top of Chicago's criminal underworld through relentless violence. Shootings happen suddenly. Machine guns roar through crowded streets. Bodies fall with shocking frequency. But the controversy surrounding Scarface wasn't just about violence. It was about admiration. Tony Camonte is charismatic, fearless, and dangerously confident. The film portrays his rise with such energy that many critics feared audiences might admire him rather than condemn him. Police organizations complained that the movie glamorized organized crime during a time when gang warfare was dominating American headlines. Censorship boards delayed the film's release for nearly a year. Producers were forced to add additional scenes condemning gangster life, including a moralizing title card reminding viewers that crime leads only to destruction. Even then, several states refused to show the film without heavy cuts. Despite the controversy, Scarface became one of the most influential gangster films ever made. Its fast pacing, brutal imagery, and cynical view of ambition would shape crime cinema for decades. But at the time of its release, many Americans believed it represented everything dangerous about the new freedom Hollywood had embraced during the pre-code years. And to them, the film looked less like entertainment and more like a warning sign that the industry had lost control. Ecstasy, 1933. When Ecstasy appeared in 1933, it triggered one of the most intense censorship battles in film history. The controversy centered on a young actress who would later become famous worldwide, Hedy Lamarr. At the time, she was an unknown European performer appearing in a quiet, atmospheric drama about a woman trapped in an unhappy marriage. The story itself was relatively simple, but the film's visual honesty was something audiences had never seen before. Early in the movie, Lamar's character runs naked through a forest after a swim. Later, the camera lingers on her face during an intensely emotional moment that strongly suggests female pleasure. Today, those scenes might seem restrained. In 1933, they were explosive. Religious groups immediately condemned the film as obscene. Catholic organizations organized protests outside theaters. Customs officials in the United States attempted to seize imported prints. The Vatican reportedly denounced it outright. For years, American audiences could only see heavily censored versions, or none at all. Yet what made Ecstasy historically important wasn't simply the nudity. It was the film's attempt to portray female desire as a real emotional experience rather than something hidden or punished. The camera treated Lamar's character with empathy instead of judgment. That approach collided directly with the moral standards Hollywood was about to enforce. Within a year, the Production Code Administration would begin regulating every script produced in the United States. And films like Ecstasy were often cited as the reason strict censorship became unavoidable. Freaks, 1932. When Freaks premiered in 1932, audiences walked into theaters expecting another strange horror film from director Todd Browning, the man who had just delivered the success of Dracula. What they saw instead shocked them, and the story takes place inside a traveling circus community populated by performers with real physical differences, people who had spent their lives working in sideshows across America. Browning cast them not as background spectacle, but as the central characters of the film. At first, the world of the circus appears surprisingly warm. The performers share meals, jokes, and friendships. They treat one another as family. But everything changes when a beautiful trapeze artist named Cleopatra decides to marry Hans, a wealthy little person in the troupe. Her affection is fake. Behind the scenes, she mocks him openly with her strongman lover. The marriage is simply a scheme to gain access to Hans's inheritance. What shocked audiences was not just the cruelty of the villains, it was the film's climactic revenge. When the performers discover Cleopatra's deception, they unite. In a dark, rain-soaked finale, They crawl through the mud beneath circus wagons, silently advancing toward the people who betrayed them. The image terrified viewers. Preview audiences reportedly fled theaters. Some fainted. MGM panicked and cut large sections of the film before releasing it. Even then, protests followed. For decades, Freaks was banned in several countries and rarely screened in the United States. Yet modern historians see something different in the film. Behind the shock value lies an unsettling message. The true monsters were never the performers on display, only the people who believed they were. She Done Him Wrong, 1933. Few performers understood controversy quite like Mae West. By the time She Done Him Wrong arrived in 1933, she had already built a reputation through bold stage performances and daring dialogue that pushed the limits of what audiences expected from popular entertainment. The Hollywood studios knew she attracted attention, and during the harsh years of the Great Depression, attention meant ticket sales. The film unfolds inside a lively 19th century saloon filled with gamblers, thieves, singers, and drifters. West plays Lady Lou, a confident performer who navigates this rough world with remarkable ease. Men constantly surround her, some fascinated by her charm, others hoping to control her influence. But Lady Lou rarely appears intimidated. Her real weapon is language. West delivers her lines slowly, deliberately, often layered with sly double meanings that audiences instantly recognized. Even simple conversation becomes charged with suggestion. The most famous line would become legendary. "Why don't you come up sometime and see me?" To religious leaders and censorship advocates, the humor crossed a dangerous boundary. Catholic organizations quickly condemned the film, accusing Hollywood of encouraging moral decline through playful innuendo. Yet the public reaction was very different. Audiences loved it. The movie became a massive success and helped rescue Paramount Pictures from severe financial trouble. Ironically, that popularity made the film even more alarming to critics, because if millions were laughing, they feared Hollywood's influence had grown too powerful to ignore. Female, 1933. In 1933, Hollywood unexpectedly introduced one of the most controversial characters of the entire pre-code era, Allison Drake. Played by Ruth Chatterton, Allison is the confident president of a major automobile manufacturing company. She oversees engineers, executives, and factory operations with calm authority. For many audiences of the time, that alone was unusual. Women rarely appeared on screen as corporate leaders controlling entire industries. But the real controversy begins when the workday ends. Sus Allison frequently invites promising male employees to her luxurious mansion for private dinners. The evening begins politely. Business discussions, polite conversation, drinks. Yet the atmosphere soon becomes personal. By morning, those same employees often receive new assignments, usually far from headquarters. For Allison, relationships function almost like business decisions. Efficient, temporary, and carefully managed. This reversal of traditional gender roles shocked critics. Hollywood had long portrayed powerful men pursuing secretaries or actresses, but seeing a woman openly controlling both corporate power and romantic relationships unsettled audiences. Censorship groups reacted quickly. Religious organizations accused the film of promoting immoral behavior and weakening traditional family ideals. Some theater owners faced pressure to cancel screenings unless the story's conclusion changed. Eventually, the ending was softened. Later versions suggested Allison might abandon her independent lifestyle and settle into a conventional relationship. Even so, the message had already reached audiences. For a brief moment, females showed a world where a woman controlled wealth, power, and desire without apology. Tarzan and His Mate, 1934. By 1934, the freedom of the pre-code era was already beginning to fade. Religious groups, political leaders, and censorship boards were demanding stricter control over Hollywood storytelling. Then, Tarzan and His Mate arrived. The film reunited Johnny Weissmuller as Tarzan and Maureen O'Sullivan as Jane in a sweeping jungle adventure filled with wild animals, dramatic landscapes, and daring action. At first glance, it seemed like another exciting chapter in the popular Tarzan series. But one moment shocked audiences. During a peaceful scene near a river, Tarzan and Jane dive into the water together. What follows is a graceful underwater sequence where the two figures glide through the current like dancers moving through air. For a few seconds, the camera captures Jane swimming without clothing. The shot was actually performed by a body double, but audiences at the time believed they were watching O'Sullivan herself. The image appeared natural and elegant, yet to censors, it crossed a forbidden boundary. Religious organizations quickly condemned the sequence as indecent, so several censorship boards demanded the scene be removed before allowing the film to screen. In many later versions, the underwater moment disappeared entirely, but the controversy went beyond that brief image. The relationship between Tarzan and Jane was portrayed as affectionate, passionate, and physically close in ways rarely shown on screen. To critics already worried about Hollywood's freedom, the film represented the final excess of the pre-code era. Within months, strict enforcement of the production code would begin, changing American movies for decades. The Sign of the Cross in 1932. When director Cecil B. DeMille released The Sign of the Cross in 1932, audiences expected a grand historical epic about early Christianity in ancient Rome. They got that, but they also got something far more controversial. The film depicts the reign of Emperor Nero, presenting his court as a world of excess, cruelty, and moral decadence. Lavish banquets overflow with wine, dancers, and elaborate costumes, while political conspiracies unfold beneath the surface. DeMille had always understood spectacle. What shocked audiences were the scenes that pushed the limits of what Hollywood normally allowed. Exotic dances, revealing costumes, and intense sequences of Roman entertainment filled the screen. One moment became especially infamous. In Nero's arena, prisoners condemned to death are thrown before wild animals for public amusement. The sequence was staged with dramatic intensity, combining religious symbolism with graphic imagery. Religious groups had mixed reactions. Some praised the film's Christian themes. Others argued that its sensual imagery overshadowed its moral message. Catholic leaders warned that audiences might remember the decadence more clearly than the faith. Censors soon demanded cuts, especially in scenes involving seductive temple dances and Nero's lavish celebrations. Yet despite the controversy, the film attracted enormous crowds. Viewers were fascinated by the contrast between Rome's corruption and the quiet courage of the Christians who refused to abandon their beliefs. Ironically, that same mixture of spectacle and scandal made the movie one of the clearest examples of how far Hollywood had pushed the boundaries of pre-code filmmaking and why those boundaries were about to change forever. Night Nurse, 1931. When Night Nurse opened in 1931, our audiences expected a hospital drama about compassion and sacrifice. Instead, they encountered a story that exposed something far darker. The film follows Laura Hart, played by Barbara Stanwyck, a determined young woman struggling to survive during the harsh economic years of the early Great Depression. With few opportunities available, she enrolls in nursing school, hoping the profession will offer stability and purpose. The first half of the film feels almost routine. Long hospital shifts, or grueling training, endless emergencies. Then Laura receives an assignment that changes everything. She is sent to care for two young girls living in a wealthy household. At first, the job appears simple, but something about the situation feels wrong. The children are weak, malnourished, frightened. Their caretaker, a cold, distant woman, seems oddly unconcerned. Soon, Laura discovers the terrifying truth. The girls are being deliberately starved while their alcoholic mother remains oblivious. Standing between Laura and the children is the family's chauffeur, played by Clark Gable in one of his earliest roles. His character is violent, intimidating, and clearly willing to silence anyone who interferes. For audiences in 1931, the film's subject matter was shocking. Child abuse, corruption among the wealthy, and brutal intimidation all appeared openly on screen. Censorship groups immediately criticized the movie for its disturbing themes. Yet the controversy also helped the film gain attention. Night Nurse revealed how far pre-code Hollywood was willing to go, showing audiences a world where danger didn't always come from criminals or monsters, but sometimes from the people society trusted most. I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, 1932. Few films of the pre-code era caused as much real-world outrage as I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, released in 1932. Unlike many controversial movies of the time, this one was based on an actual story. The film follows James Allen, a decorated World War I veteran who returns home expecting opportunity and stability. Instead, he encounters unemployment, poverty, and a society struggling to absorb millions of returning soldiers. Desperate for work, Alan becomes accidentally involved in a robbery. Even though he played only a minor role, the court sentences him to years of hard labor in a southern chain gang. What follows is a brutal portrait of prison life. Prisoners march in shackles under armed guards. They break rocks beneath scorching sun. Anyone who slows down faces the lash. The system is merciless. Escape attempts end with beatings. Complaints are ignored. And the legal system offers almost no path to freedom. When the film premiered, Southern officials reacted with fury. Authorities argued that the movie exaggerated prison conditions and damaged the reputation of their justice systems. Some states attempted to block the film entirely, but audiences were stunned by the story. The final scene became legendary. After escaping and building a new life, Alan is forced to flee again when the truth about his past emerges. A woman asks him how he plans to survive. His answer comes quietly from the darkness. "I steal." That single line left theaters in stunned silence, and it turned a controversial film into one of the most powerful social critiques Hollywood had ever produced. The Divorcee, 1930. In 1930, Hollywood released a film that quietly challenged one of the most rigid expectations in American society, the rules of marriage. The Divorcee stars Norma Shearer as Jerry Martin, a woman happily married to a successful man named Ted. At first, their life appears comfortable and secure, exactly the kind of marriage audiences were accustomed to seeing on screen. Then, Jerry discovers something devastating. Ted has been unfaithful. In most films of the era, the story would follow a predictable path. The wife would forgive the betrayal, the husband would apologize, and the marriage would be restored. But the divorcee chose a different direction. Instead of quietly accepting the situation, Jerry confronts the hypocrisy directly. If her husband believes a single affair means nothing, she decides the same rule should apply to her. The decision shocked audiences. For one of the first times in mainstream Hollywood cinema, a female character openly claimed the same freedom men had long taken for granted. Religious groups condemned the film almost immediately. Church leaders warned that the movie encouraged marital breakdown and undermined traditional values. Some communities threatened theater boycotts if it continued screening. Yet audiences responded strongly. Norma Shearer's performance earned widespread praise, and the film became a major success. What made the story so controversial was not simply the subject of infidelity. It was the film's willingness to treat a woman's independence, and her anger, as something understandable rather than shameful. And in 1930 America, that perspective felt dangerously modern. Island of Lost Souls, 1932. Hollywood had explored horror before, but in 1932, Island of Lost Souls created a different kind of fear, one that felt disturbingly close to reality. Based on H.G. Wells' The Island of Dr. Moreau, the film follows a shipwreck survivor who discovers a remote island ruled by a brilliant but deeply unsettling scientist, Dr. Moreau. At first, the island seems mysterious. Then, the truth begins to surface. Moreau has been conducting forbidden experiments, transforming animals into human-like creatures through painful surgical procedures. These beings, known as the Beastmen, live under strict rules designed to suppress their original instincts. "What is the law?" they chant. "Not to walk on all fours." The atmosphere is tense, unnatural, and increasingly disturbing. What shocked audiences wasn't just the imagery, it was the implication. The film suggested that humanity itself could be manufactured, controlled, and ultimately corrupted. Religious groups reacted quickly. The movie was condemned for its themes of playing God, moral perversion, and unnatural creation. In several countries, including parts of Europe, it was banned for years. Even in the United States, censorship boards demanded cuts. But the damage was done. The film's dark philosophy and unsettling visuals made it one of the most controversial horror films of its time, and a clear example of how far pre-code Hollywood was willing to go. For many critics, this wasn't just entertainment. It was a warning that Hollywood had gone too far. Before 1934, Hollywood briefly operated without strict censorship. Filmmakers explored crime, ambition, scandal, and moral contradictions with unusual honesty. The reaction was immediate. Religious groups organized boycotts, civic leaders demanded reform, and studios faced mounting pressure. Within a year, strict enforcement of the production code transformed the industry. Yet those daring pre-code films remain proof of a short era when Hollywood tested limits it would not approach again for decades.